All right, what do you say we do this on a Monday? Coming to live from the Built Ford Tub Studio, the Boomer and Geo program on Monday, August 7th, as we are barreling through the summer. A couple of guys here that weren't around last week, but we've got lots to get to today. The Eddie Schizzeri, what's up, my man? And this guy is fresh off a golfing trip. He looks tanned. He looks refreshed. He's got a beautiful shirt on. He is loaded, and I don't mean drunk. I mean loaded with information and sports and all sorts of different anecdotes. Good morning, Boomer Esiason. How are you?
You know, Jerry, it's good to see you. Now, I've been gone for 10 days, basically 2 weekends and 5 days off. And in that 10 days, it has been basically all hell has broken loose, both for the Mets and the Yankees. And, of course, so many other things happening in the world of sports. The Jets had played in the Hall of Fame game, and congratulations to Joe Klecco for going in finally into the Hall of Fame. That should have been done 25 years ago. Yep. And that's the thing about the Hall of Fame is that when you think about all these great players that get passed over, and then there are people that question whether or not these guys should be in who have never even played against the person that gets in. It really, when I saw Joe give his just matter-of-fact speech, and he's so kind and so gentle nowadays compared to the butcher ball of knives that he was when he played nose tackle or defensive end for the New York Jets. It was great to see him actually go in and do it in typical Joe Klecco style. I heard a couple people that went to the Hall of Fame induction and went to like his party, and most of these guys have big parties. The owners get involved, they bring in big acts, and they bring in all this kind of stuff. That was not Joe Klecco because that's not his style. His style is low key. A lot of his ex-teammates showed up at that party, I was told. He was really overcome by emotion because of that. And Marty Lyons, his great friend, did a great job introducing him and inducting him. And really, for somebody who played against him, and I got to give Gary Myers a lot of credit because Gary was the one who fought the battles, inside the war rooms of the Hall of Fame nominating committees. And it's just too bad that Joe wasn't able to reap the benefits, say, 25 years ago when I thought he should have gone in.
But at least in now, as opposed to 25 years from now when they would have righted the wrong. He's one of those guys, I saw him when I was a kid, but certainly remember him. And you always talk about the Hall of Fame. If you got to think about it, maybe they're not a Hall of Famer. He was always one of those guys. I didn't have to think about it. And
I didn't have to think about it at all.
And you won. And Gary for sure did a great job. But you two have been on this for the last 10, 12, 15
16 years. 16 years.
Doing this in this chair. And, you're one of those guys, too, that were champion for him. But, man, I think of Joe Klecco and always have. It was like, he's not in the Hall of Fame? Like, how? But we always discuss, too, sometimes things get done too late when guys aren't here to enjoy it. At least he gets to enjoy this moment and have the weekend he deserved.
So a bingo connection would be Ken Riley. And Ken Riley finally got in like Joe Klecco got in. And, if you don't really know football, you don't know who Ken Riley is. And Ken Riley was, one of the best defensive backs of his era for the Cincinnati Bengals, led the league in interceptions. He was an incredible player. And unfortunately, he passed away 3 years ago. So, of course, his family is there to accept the gold jacket and to reveal the bust and all of that. And that's another player that was severely overlooked, and probably because he played in Cincinnati. And nobody knows or knew who he was, except for those players that played with him. And he's one of those players that, before me, played in Cincinnati. Remember, and I was talking about the Ring of Honor, and we're talking about Corey Dillon being upset about not being put into the Ring of Honor. You think about a guy like Kenny Riley. He should have been put in the Ring of Honor 5 years after he, retired, but there wasn't one. So now, unfortunately, his family gets to celebrate his legacy, but unfortunately he didn't. So you're right. In regards to Joe Klecco, thankfully, he was able to share it with his family and to share it with all of his ex-teammates and all the Jet fans that showed up to support both he and Darrelle Revis.
I think BT was there with one of those Jet travel things. I'm pretty sure he was there over the weekend, too. Had a blast from what I saw on social media, if I actually saw it correctly. But good for Klecco. You mentioned Riley, who I wasn't very familiar with at all until you brought him up a few weeks ago and looked into him. You also think, too, in this time now of social media, the internet, where we see highlights as they happen or moments after they happen, if things would have been different then. Like guys now, that are popular in Seattle, maybe Cincinnati, it's a different life now because we have the access to see them, whereas 30 years ago, unless you watch Inside the NFL on HBO
right,
or shows like that, you didn't see any of these guys.
Well, you would need cable to watch it, and a lot of people didn't even have cable.
That's true too, right.
But, the
Monday Night Football, they did the halftime stuff too.
Right, but the point... Yeah, but quickly.
Very quickly.
The other thing about what happens now is that there are a lot of players that are out there that are basically championing their own cause.
Yeah.
If you remember when Richard Sherman first started, I'll never forget this. I don't know if it was his rookie year or second year. People really didn't know who he was. He was a late round draft choice. And I remember talking to Pete Carroll about Richard Sherman. He said, you watch, this kid's going to turn into being an all-pro. And we watched and we watched and we watched, and certainly he developed into an all-pro. He told you he was an all-pro.
Right from the start.
He tried to embarrass Tom Brady on a Monday Night Football game. I mean, and that's the difference. Like Ken Riley, you wouldn't even know who he was because he never did anything like that. And I don't necessarily know that the media would have picked up on it even if he did do something like that. But, he was kind, he was very professional, and he represented the Cincinnati Bengals, much like the way that Joe Klecco represented the New York Jets. But people did... the further we get away from them, the harder it is to remember how great they were as players. And that's why, this veterans committee that puts these veterans in that are overlooked is, means a lot, I think, to guys like me who appreciated those players when they played that seem to have been forgotten.
Yep, no question. So a great weekend for them. We'll do more on the Hall of Fame coming up later in the show as well. But Joe Klecco in and enjoyed the Saturday in Canton. And, of course, the game, too. So real quick on that, it was funny how, so I was at a place called, and I guess it's a chain in Texas, a place called Boomer Jack's on Thursday night. And it was interesting because a lot of the commercials, so two things I took, and we'll discuss some of the things from the trip that are sports related maybe later in the hour, but two things I took from driving around and listening to the radio, not even necessarily sports radio. I was in Galveston and Houston and Arlington, basically, in Dallas. That's where I was for the week, 3 days and 3 days. One, when Justin Verlander was traded back to the Astros, that we were listening to probably the equivalent of like 102.7 or Z100, where it was like pop music. They were breaking in with breaking news about Justin Verlander coming back, and he's returned. And it was unbelievable how popular that move was. And then the notion that football is back. So I'm like, wow, that's right. The Jets are playing tonight. It's Thursday. We go to the sports bar it's like a sports bar and restaurant, great place. And I'm thinking the Jets and Browns are going to be all over the place. It was like one little TV. And I was surprised. Now, Aaron Rodgers didn't play, which surprised me. I thought he'd go out there for one series. But the notion that football's back, like this weekend, we have a full slate of games starting on Friday, including I think there's 2 games Thursday.
Right.
Well, 2 Thursday, but then I think you get the full slate Friday and Saturday.
And Sunday.
There's games Sunday, too.
Two games on Sunday, yeah. 1 o'clock and a 4 o'clock game. I think the 1 o'clock game is Kansas City at New Orleans. But, you're going to see Patrick Mahomes? I doubt it.
Oh, who knows? You might see him for a series. That would be it.
Look, these coaches like Mike McCarthy down in Dallas, Micah Parsons keeps hitting Dak Prescott, and then, of course, somebody steps on Aaron Rodgers' foot and all hell breaks loose in practice. I mean, I laugh at it. I mean, I don't think I ever got hurt during two-a-days. And, I mean, we had 5 weeks of two-a-days.
Of real
two-a-days. Yeah. And maybe the athletes are just wound tighter. I don't know, but it's amazing to me that there would only be one TV that would be showing a game down there.
That's all it was.
What was it, all baseball?
It was all baseball. They had
they got 2 teams down there that are in contention. That's why.
They had the Ranger game on. They had the Astros and Yankees on. The Yankees and Astros, I think, were FS1, I'm pretty sure, on Thursday night because that game was on several TVs. I believe the Rangers were Thursday afternoon. They were playing the replay on several TVs, and then you had a replay of Women's World Cup on one, and then on like one little TV was the Jets and Browns, which really surprised me, just given the fact that it was the first game and everybody was talking about football being back. So anyway, back to training camp. So we take a stadium tour of AT&T Stadium on Friday, and one of the photos as we're walking through, which I've seen before having worked there, obviously, but I took a look at it because I was talking to Matthew about training camp maybe an hour prior and what it is now. Because it goes, is it really that difficult? I'm like, no, not anymore compared to what Boomer used to say. So an hour later, we're walking through the concourse, or I guess the suite area of AT&T Stadium, and there's a photo from, it's got to be the Cowboys in the 1960s, and some year in the 60s, early 70s. And you've got like 12 or 13 players on a pull-up bar and doing push-ups. I'm like, this is not training camp today. That was training camp 30, 40 years ago.
Although I did see Coach Campbell out there in Detroit doing up-downs with his team. So still doing a few up-downs here and there. You know, and they're running gassers.
They're running, yes, they are.
Just once a day, not twice a day. I mean, we were running to the ground. but now what we also see is we see guys getting a lot of rest. You know, especially guys coming off of injuries. You know, and speaking of injuries, I'm sure there's been a lot of discussion about Anthony Rizzo and the concussion and the post-concussion syndrome, and how an athlete, you know, has to be honest. He has to be honest to his team. He has to tell the team, hey, listen, I'm not right. I don't feel right. There's something wrong with me. I'm not seeing the ball or whatever, because I do remember about 3 weeks ago, we look back in the annals of our cut-ups from your boy Aaron Boone, he was talking about how healthy Anthony Rizzo is and how great he looks and all this other stuff. Now, compare that to what happened in the Hall of Fame game. Mekhi Becton goes to the trainers after about 7 plays and says, look, man, my knee's not right. I'm not feeling right out here. This turf isn't, you know, for me. And he went back in. I think he did play some special team stuff, but he only played seven downs at left tackle, and he was supposed to play 20 to 25.
Right.
So I can hear that, like here we go again with Mekhi Becton and the injuries. Well, look, you know, it's preseason. He's being honest. He does not have total confidence in that rebuilt knee just yet. It takes a while. He wants to play left tackle, so you hope that, you know, this thing calms down, and when they have these combined practices with the Panthers and then ultimately play the Panthers, he'll be able to play this week. But if he doesn't, don't get nervous about it. I mean, because he's being honest that he didn't feel right, as opposed to Anthony Rizzo, who may not have recognized that when he woke up in the morning feeling tired and feeling sluggish and feeling like he was hungover, it had more to do with the grind of baseball than it did the concussion that he suffered back in May.
Which makes sense, oh, by the way.
It does, and you know, I read an article this morning just to make sure that I knew what everybody was saying. You know, there were no complaints by Anthony Rizzo. He underwent all the testing that is required by Major League Baseball Players Association and the baseball team. I remember they flew him out to Seattle and they didn't play him, and fans were like, "Why aren't they playing him? What the hell's he doing out there?" Well, they wanted to make sure that he was 100% when he came back, and he didn't play again until the Dodgers series. So, they took every precaution that is humanly possible to take. And I guess you could say now, after watching the last, 6 weeks, of just how bad it has been, that maybe somebody should have recognized a little bit earlier that there was something wrong with him. Well,
I think we all realized that he wasn't right just by his performance. Like, you know, the whole thing with DJ LeMahieu, and we'll do the Yankees all morning, obviously, in different parts, but, you know, like LeMahieu has fallen off a cliff. And he just is not the same player. And that I really believe stems from the injury from last year. And he's gotten older and it hasn't come back. Rizzo got out to a good start. And then if you look, it's similar in that he fell off a cliff offensively. So, yeah, I think if we look back now, it's obvious to us. But as you're going through it, it comes back to what you said. If the player has gone through the testing, he tells you he's okay, and he can go out there and battle, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Right, exactly.
If you fight through stuff, you might be hurting yourself and the team long term. And if you don't fight through stuff, well, then you're not tough enough to do this.
And plus, he feels the pressure to go out there and play.
Absolutely.
And he feels the pressure to go out there and play because they gave him a new contract and because his best buddy, Aaron Judge, is not on the field, and the team needs his offensive output. And unfortunately, it just didn't work out for him. You know, I'm going to take a different tack when it comes to the Yankees because to me, and I'm not a Yankee fan, so I know I can't, you know, I know that they're frustrated. There's no question about it. But think about it. They played 112 games.
Yep.
How in the hell are they over 500? And I'm going to tell you this. They played 112 games.
Yeah.
Let's start with Carlos Rodon. He's made 6 starts and now is back, most likely going to go back on the IL.
Probably so.
Stanton has played 62 of 112 games. And in those 62 games, really, how good has he been?
Not good at all.
And loafing because he's afraid to pull a muscle.
Or they told him not to run.
Right.
And yet we send him.
Which is unbelievable that you're paying him $30 million a year and you're telling him not to run, which is ridiculous. Aaron Judge, out of the 112 games, how many games do you think he's played?
50.
58 games.
Okay.
Josh Donaldson, out of the 112 games, I know he stunk, but how many games do you think he's played?
Too many.
33 games. Just 33 games. Think about Harrison Bader. Out of the 112 games, how many games has he played?
We get back before Joe, say 65.
63. Very good. All right. How about, we know what's going on with Domingo Germán, and we know that he's got a serious problem.
Yep.
And this problem has probably been with him for quite some time, and it took something to completely melt down in the locker room for somebody to finally say, okay, enough is enough. We're going to do something about it. So, now all of a sudden, this is 1/5 of your starting rotation that you're counting on, and now he's probably going to be gone for the rest of the year.
I would not expect to see him back.
Okay, how about Nestor Cortez? How many starts does he have?
Not many. He just came back.
That's right. He had 12 starts. He only pitched 4 innings, but he pitched 4 effective innings. So, and they rushed him back because of both Germán and Luis Severino. And Severino himself has basically said he's one of the worst, if not the worst, starting pitcher in baseball. So you have Luis Severino. You have 4/5 of the starting rotation of the New York Yankees has been in a state of flux the entire year.
Yes.
All right, so let's get to, remember Aaron Hicks? Remember, he played here. He played 28 games here. How about Jose Trevino? He played 55 games here and is on the 60-day IL list. Only 2 players for the Yankees have played over 100 games. One of them happens to be a rookie, and that was Anthony Volpe, who's played 112 games, and Gleyber Torres has played 111 games. How the hell is this team over 500?
So we're going to get to that because I have a lot of thoughts on the Yankees. A lot of thoughts on the Yankees.
I'm just like...
Well, you give Garrett Cole a lot of credit because he's going to be the opposite of something I want to talk about at some point this morning, too, because the pitching, the payroll, what you get, the return on what you're giving these guys, and the Yankees, yes, you can have that tact that how are they over 500, and you're not wrong. But I will tell you why they are where they are as well.
And the one guy I didn't even list was Anthony Rizzo, because Anthony Rizzo got hurt in May, at the end of May, came back about, 5 or 6, or probably a week later.
And played through it.
And played terribly through it. And I didn't even mention DJ LeMahieu,
who has been bad, been a shell of himself.
Well. So that is really the core of your roster right there.
It's not a good team, and yet they're over 500.
Which is really, it's amazing. And I know everybody wants to scream and yell, but when you start talking about injuries and players that are injured, miss games, and all that other stuff, I don't know how many other teams, because I haven't delved into this, have as many missed games by core players as the Yankees do.
All right, we'll take a quick break.